Hi, I live in Midtown Toronto, high up in a condo penthouse overlooking a nice park. But there's a bunch of other condo towers growing all around me. Yes, Toronto is growing, but in two main ways. One is via builders, speculators, as I call them, who borrow from banks, build condo towers, and flip them to condo owners, then they pay the banks back. It's very similar to what individual speculators do. They buy and flip too, using borrowed money also. The horizon of both is 3 to 5 years. But there are a few other builders of a different kind. For example, in an adjacent street, there's an apartment building going up, a rental building. It's built by an old family of a German brewer who got rich in 1880, a long time ago. They don't build to flip, they build to own, forever if they can. It's their own capital. And the horizon is 30 to 50 years or even more. The new apartment buildings would yield between 7 and 9, maybe 10% per year, which is enough for them, and is already owned probably by their German grandchildren to save on taxes. They don't flip, they play a long game. So why am I mentioning all this? For two reasons. First reason, because I want to highlight the difference between short-term money and long-term money. The short-term thinks of seizing opportunities and flipping them. The long-term money thinks in terms of generations, 30 to 50 years. But there's an even longer-term money, very long-term money, usually unclean money. What is unclean money? That's the kind that thinks in terms of 50 to 100 years. How do they find opportunities? They create them, often in ways you don't want to know about. I mentioned before that the dirty big money today is thinking of the huge future cash flow coming out of Ukraine, of wheat, fertilizer, and oil and gas, and is positioning itself accordingly, no matter who will own the place. Who are members of long-term dirty money? Mostly you'll find them in old-line European families and in and around established political families, in Canada and the US and Europe. But there are also members of the US legislature who participate. For example, there are members of US Congress whose sons and daughters were on the board of Ukrainian companies drilling for oil and gas. Some are positioning themselves even now regarding future wheat shipment. Again, no matter who will own the place. In Western Canada, too, you can see some activity in that regard because Canada is both a breadbasket of wheat and a treasure trove of commodities. Wheat, as I said, oil and gas, and fertilizers. You can bet that some old-line European families are zoning in. I occasionally talk to people like that, which gets me to the second reason I mentioned long-term big money. I was chatting with someone I call Carl. He's a former European civil servant who later went into banking and upon his semi-retirement still advises some families. I know him through old business school friends. I was having a chat with Carl over a beer when he passed through Toronto on his way back from Calgary, where he went to freshen up on Canadian resources. From here to there, we spoke about buying really cheap. Well, said Carl, the truly cheap assets come out of bankruptcies usually, and they usually go to connected people. Like which assets, I asked. He said, look at the bankruptcy of East Germany. When it was merged to West Germany, there suddenly came up a huge number of East German companies with solid but unmaintained old plants, well-trained people, and right in the middle of Europe. So I said, but they were bankrupt, weren't they? Yes, said Carl, but so what? They were also an opportunity. You couldn't let all these millions of employees starve, could you? You had to bring in new owners and give them some revenue. Bring in new owners how? I asked. Well, said Carl, have you ever heard of the Treuhand? Vaguely, I said, remind me. The Treuhand, said Carl, was a huge trust established by West Germany, which in effect became the trustee in bankruptcy of East Germany, but of course it was done together with the Americans, and they asked for bids for everything formerly owned by the East German state. Aha, I said. So there were many cheap assets, is what you are saying. Cheap, said Carl, give away. Pay $1 and you own it. And I said, who are they given away to? Friends of the German government or of the American ones? Carl smiled throatily. Both. And other friends too, he said. People who were owed favors. So I said, government friends who bid and got cheap assets they lucked out? Oh no, said Carl. Luck had little to do with it. The bidders were preparing for this for many years. For a generation, you may say. Doing favors in advance and keeping score. But wait, I said. Are you saying that dirty big money waited around for East Germany to go bust to pick up the pieces cheap? Yes, said Carl. That's what dirty big money often does. But it doesn't come without a risk. What kind of risk? I asked. Well, said Carl, big dirty money is often also connected to the political players, and they play for keeps. Assume you say yes to bidder A, so then you have to say no to bidder B. But bidder B may be pissed off, especially if bidder B thinks he's owed a favor because he had helped along in the bankruptcy. See? Well, I said. Do you have any proof of any of this? No, said Carl, but I suggest you look up the movie about the Treuhand. I think it was on Netflix. On Netflix, I said. Why would they make a movie about a boring old topic like bidding for bankrupt companies? Oh, not boring at all, said Carl. The movie is called A True Crime, and it's about the murder of the chief of Treuhand. Some sniper shot him from very long distance, and then his paper disappeared, and then the sniper died. Like JFK killing, I asked? Yes, said Carl. Just like that, he paused. Was a good man, the Treuhand's chief, like JFK. He raised his cup. Skål, he said. I waited as he wiped the foam off his upper lip. Then I asked, so why do you bring up the Treuhand? Because, said Carl, have you thought about what would happen when China goes bankrupt? China, I said, go bankrupt. Oh, sure, said Carl. It already is. But it stretched out a few years so as not to mess up the US election. Meantime, Janet Yellen keeps it alive with swaps, like the Fed does European banks. I said. But why would China go bankrupt so fast? I thought it would take 25 years. Because, said Carl, right now they have 1.2 billion people who can't pay back what they owe, but in a few years they'll go down to 700 million, and then for sure they couldn't pay anything back, especially at the end of the decade when interest rate resumed to 25%. I said, I figured only 20%. 20, 25, said Carl, doesn't matter, they are cooked. He looked at me. You agree with me that the crash is coming soon, right? Yes, I said, next year, and during the crash, central banks will print like crazy. Right, said Carl. And this printing will set up a huge inflation wave later in the decade, and then rates will go up, and then China will go bust. Now you see? I began to see. And some of your clients are looking ahead to pick up the pieces? Not clients, said Carl. I don't have clients. I have friends. I let it pass. Now, who do you think will be doing the picking? Well, said Carl, what they need is deep pockets, management ability, and friendship with the US. In other words, I said, you need a Far East sugar daddy. Yes, said Carl, but also a structure to do this in, a Treuhand for China, if you will, to sell off the pieces. I digested all this. Then I asked the obvious questions. Who do you think will do the China Treuhand? Well, Carl said, the obvious one is Japan. But their population is also going down, like China, so they need people. And by the way, they just changed the immigration policy that more people can come in. As for friendship with the US, they just doubled the defense budget from 1% of GDP to 2%. Carl paused. Now what about the money? I said, didn't Warren Buffett just invest in Japan? Yes, he did, said Carl. I see you do keep up. He bought 10% of each of the largest trading companies, the Keiretsu. Isn't it interesting? Yes, it is, I said. There was a longer pause now. I drank some beer also. So I said, you think China will go bankrupt and Warren Buffett will help pick up the pieces for a song via the Japanese holdings he has? Carl shook his head. I didn't say that. I looked him in the eye. That's a damn good idea, Carl. It's not mine, Carl said modestly. I was just chatting to a few people over sake. Chatting where, I asked. Oh no, said Carl. That would be telling. Anyway, I have a plane to catch. We chatted some more, but let me stop here because the rest was confidential. That's all for today. Let me know below what you think of the above. Subscribe to the channel. Retweet to all your friends as subscriber and followers so they subscribe too. Then buy my books, The Sleuth Investor and The Advanced Sleuth Investor, and give them a review on Amazon, which I hope will be a good one. I'll see you next time, and meantime, thank you very much for watching.